it's getting kind of late, but I still want to hear about your umpiring and reffing experience because I
Well,
think that's fun to know that you have now this other viewpoint from sports.
well, there wasn't anything left for me to do. I couldn't.
You ran out of
So
kids.
that was a part of it. Um, Part of it was curious. I mean, a lot of this was selfish. You know, I I wanted to stay involved. When you guys left, for college, and it wasn't like I was bored because I can also sit in front of the television for a long time too. So it wasn't because of that, but selfishly, it was a challenge. It wasn't that, you know what, I never really appreciated the umpires or the basketball officials, and I want to be one because of that. No, it was a nice progression. It was a way. Again, I'll say what everybody else says. It was a nice way to stay involved with the game, but from a different perspective. I look at it as, well, I spent 20 years playing it. I spent, well, I guess I spent off and on 20 years coaching it. And if I have 20 years left, then maybe I'll be doing this. So,
Mm.
um, but it is fun. I mean, again, it's for me, and officiating is not to, you know, be able to understand coaches differently, or now I understand or understand officials differently, because I was never one that really got on officials. I know I said this in the first time we talked, the only time we talked on your podcast, that I didn't want to scream at officials ever. I mean, because you're there and you got young, impressionable players with whichever sport, boys or girls, and it is a real thing. If anybody denies that, the vibe that the coach gives off, the players give off too, and that doesn't do anything at this level, at the young level. I don't think it does much in high school either, but college, you can do it. You really can. That well-earned technical foul that a coach gets can really rejuvenate a player. That ejection, screaming at an umpire in a baseball game at an older level can make a kid, you know, be ticked off enough that he is going to, hit a ball, 50 feet further. It
Did
just
you did you see
it
the Tim
works.
Walton game this weekend?
No, no, no,
Oh,
no.
well,
I
well,
I
I
heard
have to
about it.
share it. So, yeah, there was a very, very controversial play, and I haven't even seen it. Some sort of a bunt. There was a 30-minute delay for some reason to try to figure out what the call was, and it clearly didn't go Florida's way, and you could tell he intentionally got fired up and got kicked out of the game. And then Florida ended up coming back and winning on like a walk-off grand slam. And former players and current players were all saying, yeah, that fired us up and we
Right.
were not going to lose that game. So yeah, I had to mention
Yeah.
that because it
I,
was iconic.
exactly like that. Exactly. I mean, it was Gene Hackman and Hoosiers.
Yeah.
That famous scene where he's like, kick me out of the game. He's like, what? This was back in I don't even know when it was. Was it the 40s? When was Hoosiers? 50s? 30s? Anyway, he went to the official and said, throw me out of this game or I'm going to turn into a raving, lunatic. He's like, okay, you have your reasons. Boom, gone. That can work then. But when you're talking about, 8, 10, 12, middle school and
Yeah.
younger age, I just think they look at it and like, holy crap, it makes for them to have a good story, but I don't think it's going to translate. Not that I'm sure there's a lot of coaches that, or a lot of people that would argue what I'm saying right now. But again, to me, learn the game. Don't learn how to manipulate it. Don't learn how to, find the loophole. Just learn how to play it at an excellent level.
Mm, yeah. It was funny when you said like selfishly, because I think you did also start reffing basketball games when you got your new hip, and you were like, "Well, that's a great way to stay in shape too." But um, I think it's awesome that you are still around it, and honestly, I love The fact that I know a high school coach right now who was like, the only guy who was like pretty accurate on his calls that we had all season was your dad, calling balls and strikes. Uh, um,
Well, you
I
know
just
what?
it's
Let me tell
fun.
you a quick little thing about that if we still have some time.
We do.
Because I have been officiating softball for a number of years, but only in the last few years have I tried to do, I guess, almost entirely high school. And one of my things, and one of the things that I do talk about some other, longer time experienced officials is, it is the strike zone, for
Hmm.
example. Because I've there will be the officials that have said, well, if it looks like a strike, it's a strike, meaning if it's close, anywhere close. And then there's the officials that want to have a very a tighter strike zone. And then and I'm like, look, I watched too many softball games, whether I was behind the plate, in the stands, or sitting on a bucket from the side, or even worse, watching on TV. And watch, Christina was the best example because you swung at everything.
I did.
But but
To my
she had a
default.
great eye, in my opinion,
She did.
and she'd get rung up on a strike three on a pitch that was maybe close. And I'm not, but to me on replay, I'll watch, I get to rewind it a bunch of times because I'm upset that she struck out. And I'm like, that's not a ball. That's not a strike. So I'm looking at how do you translate, a tight strike zone, and when I say tight, I mean an accurate strike zone. I'm not talking about the ball that was a strike that gets called or the pitch that was over the strike zone that gets called the ball. I'm talking about tight where, I'm not giving the pitcher a ball width or a half a ball width or, just below the knee, but I'm calling what I think a true strike is. But I don't think a lot of officials would necessarily agree with that.
Hmm.
Um, no, no, let me say that a different way. Um, it seems like some of them are closer to that philosophy that if it's close, you better be swinging at it because I'm calling it. And I'm like, nah, I'd rather see it touch that edge than not. And the same thing with the low pitch. Now the upper pitch, the high pitch, I think that personally is the toughest one to call as an official, at least for me. And
He's also
and
six
that's
six, everybody.
yeah, and that sometimes is part of it. But the high strike, according to federate high school federation rules, is if any part of the ball, top of the ball, bottom of the ball, touches the armpit.
Mm.
Now think about that. I don't have a ball with me. My armpit, my thumb is about where my armpit is, and look where the top of that ball is. That's like,
At your shoulders.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that, according to the letter of the law, the rules, that is a high school strike. And nobody calls it there. I don't call it there.
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, then can't we have a better
Depiction
a
of
better
what it is.
definition, a better
Yeah.
definition of what it is?
Yeah.
So, so again, so I bring that up because those are the challenges that I think are fun for me. Just like trying to figure out how to take a team that has no, concept of what a pick is in basketball and setting a pick or a screen that's legal, not illegal, when to set it, where to set it, how to set it, and then have the player with the ball come off that screen with the right timing, with the right distance,
Hmm.
and then be able to do something with it. That's all that's the fun part of it's the fun for me, it's the fun part of officiating, just like it was the fun part of trying to uh, coach youth sports.
You like a good challenge. You do.
It's not rocket science, right? It's not,
It's experience.
there's it's all that, right? There experience is a definite piece of it. Knowledge of the rule, being able to anticipate, Officiating is anticipation, not anticipating the foul, but anticipating the play. You know,
Mm.
there was that play this year, last week. Was it I forget it, where there was a buzzer beater.
Oh,
Uh, the freshman
the
went down the
travel,
left-hand side.
quote unquote.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I don't know the NCAA letter of the law at all. You hear announcers and they're wrong 80% of the time what they think the rule is. They bring on the expert, the former ref, and he explained it perfectly. Now he did it afterwards. It was like an interview afterwards. But he explained it perfectly. He said at this point you couldn't establish that the dribble had ended because he kind of pinned it,
Hmm.
on his left side, and that was where he took his first right step, and he and then the ball actually separated from his body where he put his other hand, and at the time he did that, it was two steps and that shot, going out
Yes.
of bounds.
So it's about when you saw his possession.
Right, right. It
And
was
again,
when
when
you
you
could
saw
it
it.
was when you could officially when you could uh, in your judgment declare that the dribble had ended.
Hmm.
That was it. And but those are the fun things because I don't mind arguing or defending a judgment, and I also don't mind saying I was completely blocked or I was out of position. And I think that's what makes a good official, is one that isn't all in your face. Don't question me.
Right.
I don't want to hear it. You weren't where I was. Blah blah blah. But one that can interact with the coach. Again, not that I always interact well, because sometimes I ignore too much. I think you want to have some kind of rapport, and I do, but very little. But again, that's something that would come later. I've only been doing high school games in basketball for a couple of years now.
Hi, Arnie.
Um, so
Yeah.
that's me.
When you get yelled at, which I say this because every umpire or ref gets yelled at, what do you have to remind yourself? I'm thinking of some refs or coaches that maybe listen, like, what do you have to remind yourself in order to keep your cool? Because you're pretty good at keeping your cool.
I, well, I mean, a piece of it is just, you're there to serve the game. So I can say that should be the number one thing that uh, you know, comes to mind when that situation happens. And that does mean being, trying to be level-headed. You're serving the game and you have a job to do. And my job is to be in the right position at the right time to make the right judgment and to be rule based in that decision and rule based in how I describe it, right? So if a coach, as mad as he is, if he asks the question he doesn't have to be respectable or respectful. He doesn't have to be quiet, necessarily. Um, but I don't mind being able to provide that that rule based answer and then move
Hmm.
on. And again, I don't coach college, and you've never seen, you'll never see me coaching college where there's a free throw and I've got a coach, just screaming in my ear because, there's about a minute of time that goes on and you just have to sit there and listen to it.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
doesn't happen. Um, but you give the rule based answers and then you move on.
Hmm. I think the coaches that are listening, they obviously, I'm sure there's some that have lost their cool before. I'm sure there's some who have had great interactions with umpires. But I would actually like to hear from you, and this could be umpires, umpiring or reffing. What do you like to see from coaches? Like from a communication standpoint. Um, like,
Again, if we're let's first consider the different age groups.
sure.
If you are a coach in middle school or lower, you should not be caring one way or another what the official calls.
Yeah.
You should just be you should just be there to see your team compete, do the things you've been practicing with them. So I don't want to hear them at all. You
Yeah.
don't have to come up to me and tell me that I did a good job. You don't have to come up to me and tell me I did a terrible job in your opinion. Just stay 100% focused on your players. And if you have to manage your parents because they're going out of, they're going, wild, then that's a good coach. Um, you know, teach them that I don't watch coaches. I don't watch coaches on what they're trying to run with a particular team. There are a lot of officials. This happens more in basketball than in softball, but there are a lot of officials that really analyze, oh, they didn't utilize this kid enough, or they stopped they went away from this whatever, uh, you know, uh, you know, uh, high screen, low, entry pass. And there's officials that they just stopped doing it, and that's why. It's like they're rating the coaches. I don't do that. I don't watch for that. I watch my area, so I'm not even seeing what's really going on except for what's in that moment, and then anticipating. All right, there's a screen coming, or I'm expecting there's a screen to come, so now I have to watch to see if there's going to be an illegal movement on the screen, or a dribbled penetration where there might be a secondary defender, and what's going to happen in that situation if he passes the ball. Could it be a charge? Could it be a block? Um, I don't look at it from that perspective. So to me, coaches are best at the early levels. Like I said, at the older levels, what do I want to see? I want I don't want to see anything, but the ones I like are the ones that you recognize a player that's having a bad day or a good day or something, and you address it in a productive way. Now again, I'm not on the bench with them, but you can see how they're interacting with the players that are on the court. Um, and if you get fired up as a coach and start screaming at the official, do you recognize that it's negatively impacting your players because they all of a sudden became focused on that too? And then can you take actions to I guess resolve that, keep them focused?
Yeah, because they're
You know,
going home like complaining about the official being the reason
well,
why they
I'm
lost.
even talking about in
Right.
game,
That
right?
too. Yeah.
If you draw your focus away from your primary responsibility, because now you're worrying about an official that will or will not call a certain thing, whether that's a pitch, whether that's a tag, any of these judgment type calls that officials have to make throughout every game. You've just taken focus off of what you can control.
Hmm.
And I'm not the first person to say that, but that it's as simple as that. The more time you spend on something that's outside of your control, the less time you spend on the stuff that's in your control. Now, as a did you ask the opposite question too? What do I like
What
to
do
see
you,
in officials?
um, no, but I do like that question.
Uh,
I'd rather you talk about that than what you don't want to see because I'd rather you talk about, what should we as coaches be striving to do and what should officials also strive to do?
well, I mean, recognize that there is no such thing as perfect games.
Yeah.
From the officials, there's not perfect games from players, and there's not perfect games for coaches. The hot topic because of the is the use of what do they call that thing?
The new strike zone in
This,
baseball?
yeah, it's got that acronym.
Oh, I don't
Um,
know it, but I know
yeah,
what you're talking about.
you know, okay, there's going to be a lot to do with that, but replay didn't stop coaches from arguing entirely with with that when they went to replay, except in tennis, right?
Hmm.
Tennis I think is probably the best thing for replay or for allowing the computer to make the call because because you've got a line that doesn't move. You don't have a
And
strike
the
zone that
ball's
has to that,
moving like 130 miles
well,
an
yeah,
hour
right, right.
or
Um,
more.
uh, but nobody where I was going was that no official is going to be perfect. But you want to see hustle. You want to see officials that work for position to be in the proper angle, the proper distance. There's angle and there's distance, and you know because in softball there's never an official at every base. There has to be movement, and the play dictates you know how quickly, no matter how fast or young or you are, you can not be in the ideal position on every single play, and that's even behind the plate. You know, there is there. I see this. I see it a lot in softball where you've got a player that's got its toes that has her toes on the inside part of the box, and you've got a catcher that's got her belly button lined up with the inside part of the plate, and they're literally on top of each other. And yet the official is supposed to find this slot that you can track the ball all the way from the release of the pitcher's hands to cover the entire plate. Now, so then think about the level that you're at, where you've got a batter that might have their whole hand over top of the plate as well,
Sure.
and
Then they
you're
get
trying
hit.
to you're trying to get well, or just doesn't have the skill or discipline yet
Yeah.
to not to think that that's where my hands need to be. Um, uh, to know that every official is trying to do the best that they can. Now, there are officials that are doing it for the wrong reason, but they usually don't last long.
Yeah.
They're not out there. They're not getting the important games, or they just give up because they had to deal with too much abuse, and maybe that abuse was actually warranted, from the coaches.
Mm,
So,
good point.
and I don't know where I'm at. I mean, I haven't been doing it that long, really. Um, One, as you mentioned before, I like to say I keep replacing body parts, so that usually knocks me out of a season. Um, but it is good, and the coaches can recognize, even bad coaches can recognize that the official that's wanting to be there and wanting to do a good job, and well, yeah, I mean it's kind of obvious. It's how you present yourself. It's how you know talk you know talk at the pregame conference. It's how you communicate. There's just different personalities.
Last question I have about umpiring. When I worked with the package deal and Jen Schro was the catching coach,
Hmm.
she always encouraged her catchers to respectably go up to the umpire, shake their hand, say, hey, or something along the lines of, hey, I'm here to protect you today. I'm so and so. Let's have a great game. Have you had an interaction, anything like that? And if you did have an interaction, or if you haven't, would you like that type of interaction as a genuine one, not one that's frou-frou, like, hey, I'm just trying to, smooch, right, to get the calls. But do you think that's something that catchers who may be listening or coaches who have catchers on the team should, try to do? Because clearly you're a team back there. Not a team, but you know what I mean. You're working
Yeah,
behind the plate all day together.
as long as it's kept to a minimum. I don't I don't care if a catcher does it. I don't care if a catcher doesn't do it. I don't. And there's different personalities. I could show you the part of the manual that says what you're supposed to do, and that's basically not fraternized.
Sure.
But there's also officials that do the complete opposite. They're talking, and sometimes they're even trying to instruct. And I stay away from all that.
Yeah.
I just kind of, here's my job. Just like when I was coaching basketball, as a good example, I never looked down at the other coach. And I always notice, like on TV, if I'm watching, even primetime basketball, if I'm looking, I'm seeing that the coach is like looking at the other coach, wondering what they're doing, not just for substitutes and actually game decisions, but just looking down. I never looked. I don't
Mm,
want to know. I've got a job. It's not, I'll say again, it's not rocket science, but there are things that you want to stay focused on, and I just stay focused on it. Um, even there are times where catcher makes an unbelievable play, and she's right there, right? She's right in front of me, and I do not try to enter that. I don't want to. I don't
friendship
comment on it.
zone. Yeah.
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 Well, or yeah, anything like that. You know, Yeah, I will talk. I will talk to a catcher if the pitcher is doing something illegal. To
Mm,
say, hey, go out and address that kind of a thing. But you keep it. I try to keep it professional.
sure. Okay. I was just curious about that one because, I had a former Victor Canales. I think you probably know who he is, but he refed and umpired a lot of my old games. He came on the podcast talking about umpiring, and he was like, "It's interesting because you have your favorite players, but you can't let them know you're their favorite players.
Right.
The ones
Yeah.
that
No, that's
respect the game and, play it right, but push limits, test you a little
yep.
bit." He's like,
Yep.
"Ashley, you were always so close to leaving early." He always talked about this. And I was just like,
There
"Yeah,
are, you,
I
you
kept you
know,
on your
I
toes,
I
man."
I even hesitate with my partner saying, or commenting because I don't of what you just said. Hey, I really like that. I really like how this team does it, or I really like this pitcher, or I don't yeah, I don't even like doing it to my partner because I don't want him thinking that I'm gonna do, play favorites with it.
Sure.
So, you know, you know, yeah, I was going back a couple games and just thinking about some things that have happened that it's not like I'm biting my tongue, but I'm like, yeah, I'll just go back to my thing and just do my thing.
Hmm. Yeah. But it's fun, and I'm glad you do it because I get to hear some of these fun stories. But I do also like hearing this from a former coach's perspective and now and player. You also played sports, but now you gotta get to see it from this light. So I appreciate you spending time with me on that part. Um, all right, last thing. This is my last question because it's getting late and I need my sleep because I know very soon I won't be sleeping at all, really. Um, what type of this is so off top. This is not sports even related. But what do you think? What advice would you give me going in from having one 2-year-old to now a newborn? When you jumped from having me and Christina, what advice can you give me on the two kids versus the one? And you can go anywhere with this.
Well, I'll tell you, not too long ago, we were walking into church, and one of my pet peeves is the noise that the parents tolerate with their kids in the pews, and I'm like, do they not know that there's other people here that they could probably just remove themselves with their child, and not say, well, it's been 15 minutes now. Now I'll get up. Um,
Hey, they say a quiet church is a dead church, Dad,
I don't
or
say
a
that.
dying church. No, that's a good one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't have a comeback for that other than I don't agree. Um,
This is great.
um, but 1 to 2 kids, I don't know. I think it definitely gets easier. Again, it's whether to tie this back to sports, whether it was your first time playing something or your first time coaching it or even your first time officiating it, there are things that become become second nature. There are things that you may start to take for granted that you didn't, but you realized that you shouldn't, and then you put that back in the forefront. Again, that whole thing about, by the time you have your third kid, that you don't care if they're, jumping off balconies, where your first one is, you're not letting them get, 6 inches from your hip.
I think they say they can get
So,
away with murder, the third kid, right? I'm just kidding.
well, yes, but I'm just talking about, you weren't worried about them, you know, choking on something, or kissing
Yeah.
a German Shepherd that they don't know, where at first you've been, hurdling over something to kind of wedge yourself between the dog and the baby. Bad situation with you because of your dog, or bad example, I should say.
It's
Um,
okay.
but
I still replay that in my head over and over, but it's
but
fine.
but um, there's always that balance. There's going to be a rebalancing. I guarantee you're going to let your second baby alone more frequently than you did your first. I'm saying, yeah, I think I could. He's on the bed and he's not going to roll over, so maybe I have time to run to the bathroom. Whereas your first one, you're like, nope, not going to do that.
Yeah,
You know, so those are going to happen. And you know what? If he rolls off the bed once,
I did it once,
probably not,
apparently, right?
probably not the end of the world. I really don't remember.
Oh, you do though. Mom
No.
remembers.
Yep. I mean, that situation. So Anna was third, right? Right. And that situation at we were playing cards at one of our cousins' houses when Anna decided to back herself up into the cellar steps, but there
Yep.
was no landing.
Yep.
So, she's just walking herself backwards, closed the door, and there was no platform. So she went all the way down.
I remember I was at
That
the
would have
bottom of the
never happened
stairs.
with you because you wouldn't have gotten close to that door, But Anna was fine. It was
She was
carpeted.
fine. Made her tougher.
Yeah. But that's it. You're gonna, yeah, just same thing. You're gonna loosen up on certain things. You're gonna realize that maybe you were too loose on something and then retighten it, and you're gonna love them. That's it.
That's good advice. I'm happy about it. Uh, the last thing about that, I don't know if you saw this video. I'll try to send it to you if I can find it. But it was about this. It was this dad. I think he was hitting with his son, and he has a younger son who's out there training with them. Kind of reminded me of honestly me and Christina. So she was always out there with us sometimes when we hit. And the older son who um, was a lot more aware was, asking, Dad, like why do you want him to be better than me? Because that's what the dad said. Like you should want your younger sibling to be better than you. Or no, I want your younger sibling to be better than you and things like that. And he's like, "But why, Dad? Like why do you want him to be better than me?" And he was kind of just instilling this perspective of you should always want your siblings to be better than you, like because that just makes you better. And again, have I sent you this video or should I send it to you
No,
if I find it?
I know exactly which one you're talking about. I can't. We're probably on each other's
We're on the
same
same side of
feeds.
TikTok.
Yeah, yeah. And and and
Um,
and I, and I got the sentiment of that video, and I'll say 80, maybe 90% I agreed with.
yeah.
You know, I because the son was just blindly saying yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, and that was part of the sweet sentiment that was part of it, and that's what people were gravitating towards. And to me, I would done it a little bit differently. I probably would have said, you do want them to be better than you, um, and there's nothing wrong with that. But once but that should also be your drive to stay ahead of them.
Mm,
It was, because it looked like the boy, and I don't know that the video really addressed it. I'd have to go watch it again now. But it was almost like it was just a foregone conclusion that he's going to be better than me, and I should just start dealing with it now.
mm.
And that there was that piece of it that I probably would have spent more time saying, No, you want them to be better than you. And again, a father to a son, or a father to a daughter, or a mother to a daughter, or a mother to a son. Yeah, those are the no-brainers. I didn't want to be anywhere in your stratosphere with where you were going. It wasn't about me and you, but for you and your sisters, I would have said, no, she's going to have the next one's going to have advantages, because you were that flower. You were the ones that had to, lay the path. Um, but that shouldn't stop you from still trying to stay ahead of her.
Hmm.
I like the scene, and you'll know it, and probably everybody that listens to this will know it, in League of Their Own, where the grandma goes to the boy in the backyard playing basketball. Hey, you're bigger and stronger than him, so take it easy on your little brother. And then you go to the little brother and say, kill him, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like that one from the sentiment of that one, probably a little bit more, because there wasn't as much nuance in my mind. So it was a good video. I think people took it the way it was intended to be taken. I would just caveat that one little section.
Yeah. Well, adventures are to come, Grandpa. This is
Yep.
exciting. Um,
And if math and science becomes their sport, I'll be perfectly fine with that too.
yeah. I I I feel the same way. And I say that now. I know I have a 2-year-old and there's still a lot to come and he's already hitting wiffle balls pretty far across the yard. But my goal is to have a similar perspective to the one that you and Mom had, which was get them involved in everything and see which one lights them up the most. And if they choose, at some point which one they love, then
Mhm.
do whatever you can to support them, but not make it your dream because you never did
Yeah,
that with me,
yeah.
which I'm
W
appreciative
w
of.
with and I don't know if this was an intentional thing with mom and I, but you know, there are still the things that are not sports related, right? And so to say get them involved in everything is is really, it's impossible, right?
Yeah.
You can't become a concert pianist and and a cancer research scientist and an astronaut and
Yeah.
a sport. So everything is there is a limit, right?
Yeah.
And I would discourage running them doing something every night, because that's going to go back to the other comment about their free time and being able to just explore and fail on their own and figure out how to be creative on their own. That I think is every bit as important as being disciplined to try to excel in one particular area, or five, right? But
Hmm.
just realize that you know there are a lot of things that you can focus too much on, that um, again take up the space of where other important things might be necessary, are necessary for
I
for,
think
for growing children.
I think you just prompted our next episode whenever we decide to air that because I think we can get thick into that
Okay.
in a good way. All right, Dad. Well, this is all I had for you today, and thanks for being willing to spend your Tuesday night, the night before technically my due date.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I'll see you at the hospital.
Okay. All right. Love you. How you feeling?
I feel good. I
Okay.
feel good. I
All
don't I
right.
don't think I like sitting for 2 hours, so I'm gonna have
Yeah,
to
I
do
just
some
looked at the clock.
stretching. I know. I liked sitting for 2 hours, I will say. I very much enjoyed this, but I think I need to do some stretches before bed.
All right. All right. Be good, honey.
Thanks, Dad. Love you.
Love you.